Brian, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Vince. I appreciate it.
So, first of all, I feel like I need to give the standard thank you for your service, not only because I do come from a family of military veterans, but also in reading up on you a bit, your military service started at a very critical time in our country's history. I'd like to start the conversation there. A little bit about your military background, and I'm also really interested in the transition from that military background to becoming a financial advisor.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me, Vince. I really appreciate it. My journey to military service started around 9:15 a.m. on the morning of September 11th, 2001. I was sitting in a math class in my high school, and that's when a teacher's aide or someone came into the classroom, interrupted what was happening, and handed the teacher there a piece of paper, and he read it to us that towers had been attacked and they were dismissing class and everybody's going to go back to their homeroom. And that's when we put the TV on and saw the second plane hit the towers, and school got let out. That night, I went home and I filled out a Navy RTC application and immediately wanted to join the Navy to serve. I applied to a bunch of schools, but I only had a 3-year RTC scholarship. So most of them were unaffordable. But my father had gone to a small school in Alabama. So he said, "Hey, Auburn University has an RTC program. Let's check that out." It was cheap. So I said, yes, sight unseen, and showed up there for my first day of freshman orientation with the NRTC there, and the rest is history. Commissioned in 2006. My first ship was a cruiser, second one was a minesweep, and then I taught some RTC at Villanova, deployed again back in 2014 on a destroyer, and then decided to get off active duty in 2015, transition to the reserves after 3 deployments and a lot of time away from family. Joined the reserves and then got mobilized again back to U.S. Central Command in Tampa from 2018 to 2019, and just got about over 19 years of service in at this point. But when I was transitioning on off of active duty, I literally had two criteria for my next career in life. They were be able to continue to help people the way I had in the service and make my own hours, not have a boss. And financial planning, my uncle had his own financial planning practice that he had been doing since 1987. I think he actually brainwashed me for this moment, because anytime I came over his house with something new, like a Hershey bar or a hat, he would pull me into his office, break out his HP 12 calculator, ask how much I paid for the hat or the candy bar, and then explain to me how much that would be worth when I was 75. And he did that all the time. I feel like the combination of military service with the discipline I learned there, and then the brainwashing that occurred all through my childhood with the financial planning stuff, it was a perfect combination to lead me down this path. And I'm so thankful that I did it.
Yeah, and it's a really unique combination. We talked a little bit about this before we hit record. Is that military service? Your story is an illustration of why so many people serve in the military. It is a sense of patriotism, it is a sense of service, it is a sense of giving back to country. Others have more basic things. They want to get an education, that they want to travel the world. There are a lot of different reasons for people to join the military. Wealth building is probably close to the bottom of all the lists, all the things that you can list. And I know as a financial advisor, that is one thing that you help people with, but it seems to be the exact opposite of military service. When I think of military service, I think of young people signing up, and it's almost like their first job in a lot of different cases. And they're being taught to be soldiers. They're not being taught to be financially responsible, not particularly in terms of wealth building. Maybe I would imagine they're taught to stay away from the payday loan places that are stacked outside of the
Absolutely. Yes, they
base,
are. Yeah.
but it's probably a pretty limited amount of education. So you specialize in behavioral finance, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So let's talk about behavior, and particularly let's talk about the military. What is it when you don't necessarily work exclusively with military people, but about a quarter of your clients are military families. What are some of the common mistakes that you see that maybe are unique to those military members that you see maybe more often in that population as opposed to just the general population of clients that you have?
I think the biggest thing is most service members don't understand how many benefits they truly have, and because they don't understand those benefits, they don't know how to take advantage of them. When I first joined and got commissioned back in 2006, the military retirement system was the old retirement system that most folks would imagine, where you do 20 years, you get a pension. In 2018, that changed, where the United States military actually started to provide folks with a 401k. If I had joined, which I did, I joined in 2016. If I had just completely left the service when I transitioned to the reserves in 2015, I would have left with nothing, absolutely nothing. After 10 years, it just would have been a thank you for your service, an honorable discharge, and enjoy your time in the civilian world. But now there's a 401k involved with it, with a pretty generous match, which is 5% after a certain number of years. And there's also a Roth option in the 401k called TSP. And I didn't have that opportunity. And now folks do, which is great. So they don't have to stay the full 20 years. They can serve 10, 15, whatever, and still walk away with a nice sizable chunk of something to show for it. That's one of the benefits. The basic allowance for housing. A lot of folks, younger folks who don't think about their future, if their housing allowance is $3,000, they'll find the place that's $3,000 so they can. What's the keeping up with the Joneses thing when you're younger? Look at what I can do. Here's what I can afford. I'll get this $3,000 apartment in Jacksonville Beach just to show that I can afford it. But that $2,000 apartment that's 3 miles inland where you can pocket $1,000 a month and put that away into your Roth IRA or something like that. There's a host of other things, but once folks actually get a grasp of the benefits and how they can work to their advantage, folks over the course of a lifetime in military service can build a substantial amount of wealth. And I have seen that over the course of my 10 years as a financial advisor with the various households that I've worked with.
So it seems like maybe in the last 10 years, the military is going through the transition that, let's say, the corporate world has gone through over the last 20 or 30 years, which is phasing out pensions, phasing in things like 401ks, which kind of changes that relationship between being a paternal relationship. I'm going to put my time in and I'm going to be rewarded for putting my time in, to a we're going to give you the tools, but you have to manage the tools yourself. I guess the good news is you're a little bit more of the captain of your own fate in that way, but it does put responsibility on your shoulders. And as a veteran of the corporate world, I've seen over a long period of time the corporate world step up in terms of education of people, because originally it was all the responsibility and no education. And now I see efforts, at least, to educate people so they can step up to those responsibilities. How is the military doing in that area in terms of educating people to take advantage of these opportunities?
One thing I do want to clarify real quick, Vince, the pension is still there. It's just less than what I will get when I retire. So because that 401k option exists, the military decided to slash the pension by an algorithm multiple. So you serve 20 years. I'm just literally going to make something up because I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I'll get a 2.5 multiple of my highest 3 years because of when I joined, but someone who joined after 2018 might get a 2.0 multiple for their pension, but they also get that 401k if they have that available too. As far as the education piece, I don't think the military does a good job with financial education. And I will say we have requirements in the United States military. There are these things, they used to be called GMTs, General Military Trainings. They've now changed them to another name, which forgive me, I don't remember the name, but these are things that were required to take every year. Classes were required to take the year in the service, but most folks might tune out ones like financial management. And that's almost the extent. So every single command has like a financial counselor, but they're not exactly trained like a financial advisor like myself would be, or a CFP. They'll take maybe a course for a day, talk about balancing a checkbook, savings account, checking account, how to properly use a credit card. And those are the baseline things that folks need to know when they're trying to build wealth. But once you progress in your career, those other things you need to know are, hey, when you put money into TSP, it's going to go into what's called a life cycle fund. And that life cycle fund, after 30 years, is going to turn into 60% bonds. Do you want that? Should you be educated enough to choose the other investment options within TSP to ensure your money continues to grow for you even after you're 45 or 50 or 60? Do you want it to get more conservative? When you deploy, you get special considerations to put a chunk of the money you make on deployment directly into TSP, which is more than you would normally be authorized to do. Do folks know about that? Do they take advantage of that? Just little things like that. We don't do a good job of. We teach the class every year because it's required. We don't we don't go to the service member and beg them to understand this because it's good for their future. That's what it should be.
And the military is about 10 years into this thing. I would have to say, in my 30 some odd years in corporate, it probably took corporate, in my opinion, at least a little slice of that world I've lived in, probably about 20 to really get with it. So it's not an overnight thing. With that being said, one way that individuals can close that gap is to engage a financial advisor like yourself. What are some other ways in terms of self education? Are there books or resources, particularly, that you can recommend maybe for a military member who's listening and just wants to start that self education? What are some recommended paths that you can recommend?
My favorite book ever written about the topic of building wealth is a book by a gentleman named Nick Murray, and that book is called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth. And essentially, it educates folks on what it essentially goes into the behavioral finance, which is something that I specialize in. And in the behavioral finance aspect, what it does is essentially it tries to retrain how people think about their money. So, do you mind if we play a game together for a minute?
Let's go.
Okay. So, in 2017, there was a doctor named professor of economics from the University of Chicago named Dr. Richard Thaler who won the Nobel Prize in psychology, even though he was an economist. And what he found was all folks make rational decisions with their money, with the exception of their investments. Okay, so we're going to play a game. So you go to the grocery store, whatever, once every other week, once a week. What is the vice you have to have when you go to the grocery store? I'll give you my example. My vice is Milano cookies. If I had a sleeve of Milano cookies right here, 15 of them, all 15 would be gone before this podcast is over. Trust me. So what's your vice, Vince?
I was going to go cookie, but I have many vices, so I'll just pick another one. Let's say ice cream.
Okay. We'll say, can we just use Ben and Jerry's as an example?
Yes,
Okay.
love it.
You know, where I live outside of Philadelphia, Ben and Jerry's probably runs like $5.99 a pint. Okay. So let's just say you walk in your local grocery store and Ben and Jerry's on sale and it is $1.99 a pint. What are you going to do?
I'm going to buy a lot of Ben and Jerry's.
Okay. Why would you not assume it's tainted with salmonella?
I trust that the grocery store would not do that
Okay.
for my sake and their sake.
When you go buy a new car, do you go to the manager of the dealership and say, "Whoa, I don't want any special rebates or offers here. I want to pay full price for this thing"?
Quite the opposite. Absolutely
Exactly.
not.
Okay, so what Richard Thaler found is again, all human beings make rational decisions with their money, with the exception of their investments. So if I had someone in a blue chip portfolio that held the greatest 500 companies in the world that ever existed, and their portfolio went down over the course of 6 months by 20-25%, what do most people do?
Most people bail.
Most people freak out, they panic, right? They assume that there's something wrong with the investment they're in. But you don't go open the freezer, pull up the top to Ben and Jerry's and see if it's full of mold. You just trust that it's $1.99 a pint because it's on sale for whatever reason. And when you go to buy the car, you haggle for that reason. So the behavioral finance aspect is trying to rewire and retrain folks how they perceive those temporary routine downturns, which are a normal part of investing in the market. And this book, Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth, goes through that in depth, but it also goes into some practical things about low cost investments. What should you hold? And then when those routine things in the news cycle do pop up, doing your best to ignore them, tools on how to do that. And you know what? One of the other things is, as you said, you would buy more of Ben and Jerry's. So when the market goes down 15, 20%, kind of like it did in April, I'm calling as many folks as I can and I'm saying, do you have extra money lying around? Everything's on sale. We need to buy more now because we'll never see these prices again. That's how I try to retrain folks to think about their investments and the good and the bad and how it can all look good if you just retrain your mind.
It's the investor mindset, which to your point is so counterintuitive to the way we approach other things. And that's the irony of what we're talking about. Again, what's happened in the corporate world for a generation and what's starting to happen in the military now is we're putting people in the position to be investors, but not educating them on the game that they are now involved in. So again, going back to what happened this past April, which I got to admit shook me a little bit, but I've been in the game long
Mhm.
enough to have gone through the Great Recession and the .com bubble burst, that type of thing. So even though I was emotional and my wife and I had some interesting discussions about what we should do at the time, in the back of my mind is markets do what markets do. This isn't the first time, it's not the last time. We throw out the term unprecedented so much in the news and just in society in general. April was a scary time, but one thing that you can't say is that it was unprecedented. There's precedent, and that's generally the way that I try to think about investing myself. Wake me up when something truly unprecedented happened, and so far, even the Great Recession. What do we refer to the Great Recession as? Oh, it's the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression.
Exactly.
So, by that definition, it was not unprecedented. So,
You could go back to the Dutch and the tulips,
there you go.
um,
There you go.
to even see when the first hysteria and mania and all that stuff started.
Yeah, yeah. Another favorite book of mine is A Random Walk Down Wall Street, which also goes through that history. So, are there any other tips that you would have? What we've talked a lot about investing, and certainly, I I think maybe the takeaway from this conversation, as far as that's concerned, is the good news. Building wealth, even through military service, is possible. Would you say that the good news about the 401ks and the investment opportunities at the exchange of a less generous pension, do you think that creates actually more of an opportunity for wealth if managed correctly for military members than they had before?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Specifically referring to TSP with the military, the investment options are limited inside of it. But once you educate yourself on those different investment options, the C fund, the S fund, the I fund, the G fund, the F fund, what they're designed to do and what fits your age and your ability to be aggressive, then yeah, you can absolutely do extremely well if you serve a 10, 15, 20-year career in the service. Even if you only did 5 years, if you had the asset allocation properly and put where it should be, over time you're going to earn money. But those life cycle funds that are designed to get more conservative as the years go by, folks just don't understand what they are. And the default is to put folks in something that is supposed to get to the perfect allocation when they're retired at the age of 65. And that's old news. We're not living in the 80s anymore. People are living longer. Most folks don't say, I want to retire at 65 and then die the next day. They're going to live a 30-year retirement. So their money needs to continue to grow for them in retirement. And that doesn't mean having an allocation of 80% bonds and 20% equities. It means that your investments have to keep pace or beat inflation. And folks have learned that the hard way the last year or two, that if their investments are keeping pace with inflation, their lifestyle's being cut back. And folks who have retired, they are now not living the retirement they had been accustomed to.
Yeah, the way I look at it is part of it is having a good understanding of risk because we're talking about different risk here. There is market risk, even if you're investing in indexes. Like we've talked about, markets go up, markets go down. There is risk there. The other risk is inflation risk. Markets go up, markets go down. Prices and inflation only go in one direction, generally speaking.
Yep.
And if you have deflation, I'm no economist, but something fundamentally has
Yeah,
gone wrong. So,
absolutely.
in the best case scenario, prices are going to continue to go up. Hopefully, not too fast. You have to factor that in, and I think once you factor in both sets of risk and understand what risk is, you can make a more balanced and informed decision. Brian, I really want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for the reference of the reading material. But of course, if listeners would like to learn more, they can reach out to you. Pultro Financial Management is your firm. We will put the link directly in the show notes. Other ways to reach you, we'll also put your LinkedIn, your Facebook, if listeners want to reach out on social media, that type of thing. Just briefly give the listeners a quick overview of the type of services that you offer at Pultro Financial Management.
It depends on the stage of life you're in, but one of the things, my bread and butter, my wheelhouse is engaging with folks who are in the exact same point of life as I am. And the reason I like to do that the most is because when I'm sitting across from someone, I can empathize, I can sympathize with exactly what they're going through. So young couples, married, kids, sports, saving for college, trying to allocate that 401k, maybe have to buy a minivan now because you have so many kids. Maybe the house has to get a little bit bigger. Those families between like the ages of 30 and 50, those are the folks that I personally like to serve because I want to grow with them through the same stages of life that I'm growing through in the future. Of course, we do retirement planning. My oldest client is 93 years old. My youngest client is 18 years old. So I run the gamut. But again, the folks that I truly love to engage with are the folks that are sharing the exact same experiences as I am because we can go through them together and we can grow together.
Wow. And you're dealing with people who are in that meat of life where everything's hitting them. They do have to think about their own retirement, but they also have to think about college. They may have aging parents where they have to think about healthcare and supporting them.
Exactly.
Those people can use the full range of services and advice that you
Absolutely.
offer. So, Brian, I want to thank you one more time. I want to thank you for spending time with us here on CFO at Home. And one more time, thank you for your service.
I appreciate your time, Vince. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an honor. Thank you.